Chapter 7 Bird Calls and Sacrifices. The sun rises on our village, shrouded in grief. We gather at the edge of the forest, where 5 freshly dug graves await their occupants. 5, not 2. Tuck had no mercy for our wounded through the night. I watch as they lower Malira into the earth, her favorite weaving placed gently over her still form. My throat tightens as I remember the soft furs she'd craft for me. The intricate patterns had always made me feel like I belonged, despite my differences. Now who will weave our stories into cloth? Norn follows, his hunting spear clasped in lifeless hands. I think of his boisterous laugh, his playful jabs that, annoying as they were, always carried a hint of affection. "Maybe next time you can join us, yeah?" he'd say. "Yeah. Next time, Norn. Next time." Then comes Tekla, her swollen belly a cruel reminder of the 2 lives lost in one. Quovac stands at the edge of her grave, little Suro clutching his leg. The raw anguish on Quovac's face is almost too much to bear. He's lost not just his wife, but the future they were building together. Suro's quiet sobs cut through the silence, a child too young to fully understand, yet feeling the weight of loss all the same. As they lower Chiron's body, I hear a strangled cry that chills me to my core. My eyes find Kyra, her face pale and drawn, a bandage visible beneath her tunic. She's alive, but the sight of her brother being lowered into the earth has shattered what little composure she had left. Kyra collapses to her knees, her body racked with sobs. Her hands clutch at the freshly turned soil, as if she could somehow reach through it and pull Chiron back. The sound of her grief is raw, primal, a keening wail that seems to echo the pain in my own heart. I want to go to her, to offer some comfort, but my feet feel rooted to the spot. What could I possibly say? What words could possibly ease the agony of watching half of yourself be buried? The guilt of my own survival weighs heavily on me, making each breath a struggle. Chiron's face flashes in my mind, his quiet smile, the determined set of his jaw when he was focused on a task, the way his eyes would light up when Kyra came up with a particularly daring plan. Now that face is forever still, those eyes forever closed. The finality of it crashes over me like a wave against the shore, and I stagger slightly. As the first clods of earth hit the shroud, the sound seems to reverberate through my entire being. This is real. This is happening. Chiron is gone, and nothing will ever be the same. Kyra's sobs have quieted to a low, constant keening. Her fingers dig into the earth, leaving muddy streaks on her skin. The sight of her, broken and alone, finally spurs me into action. On shaky legs, I move towards her. As I kneel beside Kyra, I don't speak. There are no words for this moment. Instead, I simply place my hand on her shoulder, offering what little comfort I can through touch alone. She turns to me, her eyes red-rimmed and filled with a pain so deep it takes my breath away. For a moment, she just looks at me, as if trying to understand why I'm here and her brother isn't. Then, with a choked sob, she collapses against me. I hold her as she cries, her tears soaking into my tunic. My own eyes burn, and I don't try to stop the tears that fall. Together, we mourn for Chiron, for the future that will never be, for the adventures left unfinished. As the burial continues around us, Remis is the last, his young face peaceful in death. I didn't know him well. Another future cut short, another family left to mourn. I make a silent promise to Chiron and to Kyra. I'll be there for her, no matter what. I'll help her navigate this new, broken world. It's not enough. Nothing could ever be enough to fill the void Chiron's loss has left. But it's all I can offer. And as I hold Kyra, feeling her pain as keenly as my own, I realize that this is what growing up truly means. It's not about adventures or proving myself. It's about being there when it matters most, about carrying the weight of loss and still finding the strength to move forward. The world has changed, and we've changed with it. But we're still here, still breathing, still fighting. And somehow, we'll find a way to honor Chiron's memory by living the lives he no longer can. As the earth covers them, Ansel speaks of rebirth, of returning to the cycle of life. But all I can think of is the emptiness they leave behind. The weaving left unfinished, the hunts never to be undertaken, the wisdom lost to time, the laughter I'll never hear again. Tornu stands beside me, his face a mask of grief. I know he's seeing not just 5 bodies, but 5 lifetimes of memories, 5 threads in the tapestry of our tribe, now abruptly cut short. As the ceremony ends, the air is heavy with unspoken accusations. I feel eyes on me, questioning, judging. Where were you? They seem to ask. Why weren't you here? I have no answer, at least none that I'm willing to give. Kvovak's agonized wail breaks the silence as the last shovelful of earth falls on Tekla's grave. He gathers Suro in his arms, both of them shaking with the force of their grief. Kyra remains by Chiron's grave, her hand resting on the freshly turned soil, as if she could reach through and touch him one last time. As we begin to disperse, the reality of our loss settles over the village like a shroud. 5 graves, 6 lives, 6 futures. 6 beloved members of our community gone in one cruel stroke of fate, and we, the survivors, are left to somehow find a way forward, carrying the weight of their memories and the ache of their absence. The days that follow are a blur of activity. Ansel orders the reinforcement of our wooden palisade around the village, while hunting parties are doubled. I try to help where I can, but my scrawny arms struggle with the heavy logs, and I'm more likely to trip over my own feet than successfully patrol the perimeter. It's during one of these failed attempts to help that Lolly corners me. Lolly's eyes narrow, a cruel smirk playing on her lips. Well, if it isn't our brave explorer, she sneers, her voice dripping with contempt. Finally decided to grace us with your presence? I bite back a retort. Now's not the time for our usual squabbles. I'm just trying to help, Lolly. Help? She laughs, but there's no humor in it. Where was your help when that beast was tearing through our village? Where were you when Norn and Chiron were here, fighting for their lives? Each word is a knife, twisting in my gut. Because she's right. I wasn't here. I was out chasing adventure while my people were dying. I'm sorry, I start to say, but Lolly's not interested in apologies. With a snarl, she shoves me hard. I stumble backward, remembering too late Zolesh's graceful roll. I try to imitate it, but instead end up sprawled in the dirt, my limbs tangled beneath me. Lolly's bone knife is in her hand before I can blink. I scramble to my feet, drawing my own blade. We circle each other, the air thick with tension. You think you're so special, don't you? Lolly spits, her knife glinting in the sunlight. Tornu's precious protege, always off on some grand adventure while the rest of us do the real work. You should have been here. Maybe today you'd be where you belong, in the ground, right next to the ones who actually cared about this tribe. She strikes, a quick jab that I barely dodge. My heart pounds in my chest as I counter with a clumsy swing. That's not true, I pant. I care about the tribe just as much as you do. Lolly scoffs, easily sidestepping my attack. Care? You don't even know what that word means. You didn't lose anyone in that attack. You don't know what it's like to watch everyone you love die. Her words hit far harder than any physical blow, despite whether or not they're true. I lost my parents too, but we were both too young to remember our parents passing. And I know she was close with Norn. How close, I'm not sure. I've never really cared, and now it doesn't really matter. I lost Chiron, one of my closest friends, but that doesn't seem to matter right now either. For an instant, I remember the story Tornu told me about her past, about the losses she's suffered. In this moment, I see not an enemy, but a girl as broken and scared as I am. But that moment of empathy costs me. Lolly's bone knife slices through the air, catching my arm. It's a shallow cut, but it stings like fire. First blood to me, she grins, a manic gleam in her eye. Maybe if you spent more time training instead of daydreaming, you'd be of some use to the tribe. Anger flares in my chest, hot and fierce. At least I'm trying to learn, to grow. I shoot back, circling warily. All you do is cling to the past, lashing out at anyone who dares to think differently. Lolly's face contorts with rage. She charges, her knife a blur of motion. I manage to parry her first strike, the impact jarring my arm. But she's relentless, each attack fueled by years of pent-up grief and anger. You know nothing about me, she snarls between blows. You have no idea what it's like to lose everything, to be left alone in a world that doesn't care. Her words shake me like an earthquake beneath my feet, momentarily stunning me. That's not true, I gasp, barely deflecting a vicious swipe of her knife. I lost my parents too, Lolly. I know what it's like to feel alone. For a split second, Lolly's attack falters, surprise flickering across her face. But it's quickly replaced by renewed fury. You had Tornu! She spits, lunging forward. I had no one, while I watched my sister waste away. I'm on the defensive, barely keeping her blade at bay. My arms ache, my movements clumsy and unpracticed. But as we continue this deadly dance, fragments of what I observed during Tornu and Zolesh's brief fight with the Dracolith start to surface in my mind. It's not much, but it's enough to keep me alive. Barely. You're right, I pant, ducking under a wild swing more by luck than skill. I can't imagine what that was like for you. But Lolly, pushing everyone away, hurting others, that won't bring them back. It won't ease the pain. For a split second, I see something flicker in her eyes. Pain, raw and unguarded. Then it's gone, replaced by cold fury. Shut up, she screams, lunging forward with renewed vigor. Lolly's fury gives her speed I can't match. I block her first strike, catching her wrist with my own and causing both our knives to thud against the ground. As I watch them fall, her other fist connects with my jaw, sending me reeling. I taste blood, my vision blurring. Lolly presses her advantage, raining blows on me faster than I can block. Each impact sends shock waves of pain through my body. I try to fight back, but my strikes are clumsy, easily deflected. Not so special now, are you? Lolly sneers, driving her knee into my stomach, and I double over, gasping for air as I hit the ground. Suddenly, a blur of motion catches my eye. Kyra barrels into Lolly with a feral scream, tackling her to the ground. I've never seen Kyra like this, her face contorted with rage, her fists flying in a fury of blows. Fuck you, Kyra shrieks, pummeling Lolly's face. Leave him alone. For a moment, I'm frozen in shock. This isn't the Kyra I know. The sweet girl who taught me bird calls, who cried in my arms at her brother's grave. This is something else, something born of grief and pain and fury. I try to get up, but the pain is damn near unbearable. I force myself up to my elbows and crawl pitifully towards them, unable to even bring words from my aching lungs, still struggling for air. With a snarl, Lolly throws Kyra off, reversing their positions. Now it's Kyra on the receiving end of that relentless assault. I try to move, to help, but my body won't cooperate. All I can do is watch in horror as Lolly's fists connect again and again. Kyra's screams turn to sobs, her arms raised in a feeble attempt to protect herself. Chiron, she cries out, the name a broken plea. Chiron, help me! The sound cuts through me like a knife. Kyra's not fighting anymore. She's curled into a ball, weeping for a brother who can't come to her rescue. Something snaps in me. Ignoring the pain screaming through every nerve, I force myself to my feet. My vision swims, my legs threatening to give out, but I stumble forward. Lolly, I rasp, my voice barely above a whisper. Leave her alone. Lolly turns, her eyes wild. Blood trickles from a split lip. Kyra got in a few good hits after all. You want more, twig? She growls. I raise my fists, knowing it's useless, but unable to stand by. Just stop, please. She laughs, a harsh, bitter sound. You never learn, do you? The world spins as Lolly's fist connects with my temple. I hit the ground hard, stars exploding behind my eyes. As darkness creeps in at the edges of my vision, I hear Lolly's voice, distant and fading. Stay down, Yoren. It's where you belong. Then mercifully, everything goes black. I come to slowly, the throbbing in my head pulling me back to consciousness. The familiar scent of herbs and poultices fills my nostrils. Melnin's hut, again. As my eyes adjust to the dim light, I see Kyra in the bed next to mine, her face a tapestry of bruises. My heart clenches at the sight. This is my fault. If I hadn't provoked Lolly. You're awake, comes a soft voice from across the room. Holt, propped up in his own bed, offers a weak smile. We were starting to worry. I sit up. I try to sit up, wincing at the pain that shoots through my body. How long was I out? Most of the day, Kyra answers, her voice hoarse. Our eyes meet, and I see a whirlwind of emotions there. Pain, guilt, fear. Kyra, I'm so sorry, I start, but she shakes her head. Don't. It wasn't your fault, Yoren. I lost control. I've never felt rage like that before. The silence that follows is heavy with unspoken words. It's Holt who finally breaks it. At least you feel something, he says quietly. My grandmother, she doesn't feel anything anymore. I turn to him surprised. Holt rarely speaks about his family. The withering sickness? I ask gently. He nods, his eyes distant. I'm sorry. That was a bit out there, wasn't it? It's just... She's in the late stages now, just lying there, breathing, eyes open, but seeing nothing. We take turns feeding her, but... He trails off, swallowing hard. It's like we lost her 2 cycles ago, when her mind went, and now with Ramis gone. Or miss? I prompt, remembering the quiet boy who always followed Holt around. My best friend, Holt says, his voice cracking. He wasn't family, but he was all I had outside of it. The weight of our collective losses settles over us like a heavy cloak. I think of Chiron, of Norn, of all those we've lost, of Holt's grandmother, alive but not living, of my own parents, taken by the same cruel sickness. Do you ever wonder, Kyra says softly, what caused it? The withering sickness? It's been plaguing our tribe for generations, but where did it come from? I nod, a thought forming. Maybe it's something in the water? Or a plant we use? Holt shakes his head. I've been studying with Melnin. We've tested everything we can think of. It's like the sickness came out of nowhere generations ago. Could it be a curse? Kyra suggests, her voice small. Something unnatural? The idea sends a chill down my spine. I think of the strange power I felt at the lake, the voices I sometimes hear. Could there be darker forces at work? Whatever it is, I say, my voice stronger than I feel. There has to be a cure. Somewhere out there, beyond our borders. That's enough of that talk, Melnin's voice cuts in as she enters the hut. Her eyes are kind but firm as she looks at each of us in turn. You all need rest, not wild speculation about things beyond your control. As she bustles around, checking our bandages and administering herbs, I catch Kyra's eye. There's a spark there, a glimmer of the fire that's always drawn me to her. I know she's thinking the same thing I am. This isn't over. Melnin finishes her rounds and heads to the door. Sleep now, she says. Your bodies need to heal. But as she leaves and darkness settles over the hut, I make a silent vow. If I ever get the chance to leave on my grand adventure, I'll find a cure for this sickness. For Holt's grandmother, for my parents, for all those we've lost and those we might yet save. In the quiet of the night, surrounded by the soft breathing of my injured friends, I feel a spark of hope. We've survived. We're battered, broken in ways that might never fully heal. But we're alive. And as long as we're alive, there's hope. The sun beats down mercilessly as I make my way to the palisade a few days later. My body still aches from the fight with Lolly, but I can't sit idle any longer. Not when there's so much work to be done. As I approach, I see Ansel and Ekra locked in heated discussion, their voices carrying over the sound of wood being cut, holes being dug. Zivo stands nearby, his eyes darting between the two leaders as his hands work steadily, weaving reinforcements into the wooden wall. We need to focus on rebuilding homes, Ekra, Ansel insists, his usually calm demeanor showing cracks of frustration. Our people need shelter, stability. Ekra's laugh is harsh, bitter. Stability? What good is a roof if there's a Dracolith tearing it off? Every resource we have should go to weapons, fortifications. I step closer, drawn into their orbit. Ansel notices me first, his eyes softening slightly. Yoren, good to see you on your feet. Perhaps you can offer a fresh perspective. Ekra scoffs, but doesn't object to my presence. I clear my throat, suddenly aware of the weight of their attention. What exactly are we discussing? The future of our tribe, Zivo says softly, not looking up from his work. It's the most I've heard him speak in weeks. Ansel nods. We need to decide how to allocate our limited resources. Rebuild our homes in communal spaces, or pour everything into defense. I consider for a moment, thinking of the devastation I've seen, the fear still lingering in everyone's eyes. Couldn't we do both? Maybe not equally, but we need security and normalcy. A compromise, Ekra sneers. That's how we end up half prepared for everything and fully prepared for nothing. But it's not just about physical preparation, is it? I press on, emboldened. Our spirits need healing, too. Ansel's eyes light up, but before he can speak, Ekra cuts in. Spirits won't stop teeth and claws. We need to know why we were attacked, what we're truly up against. The conversation shifts, tension ratcheting up another notch. I've been saying we need scouts, Ansel argues. We can't defend against what we don't understand. Ekra's face darkens. Absolutely not. We've lost enough lives. We seal ourselves off, make this place impenetrable. And slowly starve, Zivo interjects, surprising us all. Our hunting grounds aren't infinite. Life springs fish neither. We need to know what's going on out there. I nod, thinking of Zolesh, of the wonders and horrors I've glimpsed beyond our borders. Zivo's right. We can't just hide and hope the world forgets about us. Then what do you suggest? Ekra demands, her eyes flashing. Send our children out to die? No, Ansel says firmly. But we could change how we prepare them. The air seems to still as we all realize the implications of his words. Change the traditions that have defined our tribe for generations? What are you suggesting? I ask, both excited and apprehensive. Ansel takes a deep breath. We adapt our training. Teach our young not just to hunt, but to survive, to observe, to think critically. To fight, Ekra adds, a note of approval in her voice. To understand, Zivo counters softly. The forest, the creatures in it, all of it. We need to know why or how these creatures began crossing into these lands that have been safe for generations. I look at each of them in turn, seeing the weight of our tribe's future in their eyes. Why does it have to be one or the other, I ask? Why can't we teach them everything? To build and to fight, to observe and to act. A heavy silence falls. I can almost see the gears turning in their minds, weighing tradition against necessity, fear against hope. Finally, Ansel speaks. It won't be easy, changing generations of tradition. Nothing worth doing ever is, Ekra says, and for once, there's no bite in her tone. Zivo nods, a small smile playing at his lips. We adapt or we die. Isn't that what the elders always say? As the sun begins to set, casting long shadows across our battered but enduring village, I feel a glimmer of hope. We're bruised, we're scared, but we're not broken. We're changing, growing, and maybe, just maybe, we're becoming strong enough to face whatever lies beyond our borders. Ansel claps a hand on my shoulder. Thank you, Yoren. Sometimes it takes a young voice to remind us of old wisdom. I nod, a warmth spreading through my chest that has nothing to do with the fading sunlight. As we turn back to our work, reinforcing not just our walls but our resolve, I can't help but feel that something fundamental has shifted. We're not just surviving anymore. We're preparing to truly live. A peculiar bird call echoes through the late afternoon air as I gather herbs near the village outskirts in a vain attempt to forget the events from earlier in the week with Lolly. It's unlike anything I've heard before, a lilting, almost mournful sound that seems to tug at something deep inside me. Curiosity piqued, I abandon my task and follow the sound. It leads me through a tangle of undergrowth, past the old oak where Tornu tells his stories, and towards the edge of our burial grounds. As I approach, the call grows clearer, more distinct. But there's something off about it, something not quite natural. I push aside a low-hanging branch and freeze. There, kneeling before a fresh mound of earth adorned with river stones, is Kyra. Her eyes are closed, her lips pursed as she produces the haunting call I've been following. Chiron's grave. I should leave. This is clearly a private moment, not meant for my eyes. But as I start to back away, a twig snaps beneath my foot. Kyra's eyes fly open, her call cutting off abruptly. Yoren? She says, hastily wiping her eyes. What are you doing here? I shift uncomfortably, gesturing vaguely behind me. I heard a bird call. I've never heard anything like it before, so I followed it. I didn't realize it was you. Kyra's cheeks flush, and she looks down at her hands. Oh, yeah. It's something Chiron and I used to do. When we were little, we'd make up bird calls to signal each other. A sad smile flickers across her face. My chest tightens. I take a hesitant step forward, then stop, unsure. It's beautiful, I offer lamely, wishing I knew the right words to say. Kyra shrugs, her fingers tracing patterns in the dirt. Thanks. I thought maybe if I did it here, he might hear it, wherever he is. The raw pain in her voice makes me ache. Before I can stop myself, I blurt out, Can you teach me? Kyra looks up, surprise evident in her tear-stained face. Teach you? I nod, committed now. Yeah, the call. Maybe if more people know it, there's a better chance he'll hear it from the Vale. Or maybe his spirit will be guided back to Alara. You know. For a long moment, Kyra just stares at me. Then slowly, a genuine smile spreads across her face. Yeah, she says softly. Yeah, I'd like that. As the sun rises higher, casting long shadows across Chiron's grave, Kyra teaches me the intricate whistle. My first attempts are embarrassingly off-key, but she's patient, demonstrating again and again until I start to get it right. Not bad, she says after my latest try, nudging my shoulder. You might make a decent bird yet. I grin, pleased by her praise and the light that's returned to her eyes. Well, I have a good teacher. Kyra's smile falters for a moment, her gaze drifting back to the grave. Chiron was better at it. He could mimic any bird in the forest. I nod, unsure what to say. Then an idea strikes me. Hey, why don't you tell me about some other calls you two made up? Maybe we could use them during hunts or something. Kyra's eyes light up at the suggestion. As we sit there, trading whistles and stories, I can't help but feel like I'm glimpsing a side of Kyra, and Chiron, that I never knew existed. It's bittersweet, this window into their shared world, but it feels important somehow, like I'm helping keep a part of Chiron alive. When we finally stand to leave, Kyra hesitates, then gives me a quick, fierce hug. Thanks, Yoren, she mumbles into my shoulder, for listening, for learning. I pat her back awkwardly, acutely aware of how small she feels in my arms. Not a child anymore, but not quite grown either. Any time, I say, meaning it. That's what friends are for, right? As we walk back to the village, Kyra chattering about other signals she and Chiron used to make, I make a silent promise. I'll look out for her, the way I'm sure Chiron would have. The mournful bird call echoes in my mind, a reminder of loss, but also of connection, of the bonds that tie us together, even in grief, especially in grief. Later that evening, Tornu and I sit by the fire outside my hut. The silence between us is heavy with unspoken words. Tornu's eyes reflect the dancing flames as he stares into the fire, his weathered hands absently tracing patterns in the dirt. I watch the embers float up into the night sky, each one a fleeting reminder of the day's events. My hand unconsciously moves to my arms, fingers tracing the fresh cut left by Lolly's bone knife. The physical pain has dulled, but the memory of her eyes, blazing with fury and accusation, still burns bright in my mind. She blames me, I finally say, my voice barely above a whisper. Lolly, for not being here when the Draculith attacked. Tornu's gaze shifts from the fire to me, his expression a mixture of concern and something deeper. Understanding, perhaps? Grief makes us lash out at the easiest targets, Yoren. It doesn't make it right, but it makes it human. I nod, swallowing hard against the lump in my throat. I know, but knowing doesn't make it easier when she's coming at me with a knife, spitting venom about how I abandoned the village. My hands clench into fists, nails digging into my palms. I freeze up, Uncle. Every damn time. My mind goes blank and all I can think about is how to make it stop. And the worst of it? I'm not even sure that she's wrong. Not this time, anyway. Tornu reaches out, his calloused hand covering mine. The simple gesture grounds me, pulling me back from the edge of panic. Breathing helps, he says softly. When you feel that fear rising, focus on your breath. It won't solve everything, but it might give you a moment to think. I try it now, drawing in a deep breath and letting it out slowly. The knot in my chest loosens, just a little. How do you do it? I ask. Stay calm when everything's falling apart around you. A sad smile plays at the corners of Tornu's mouth. Practice, he says, and the knowledge that panic never solved anything. We've all lost people, Yoren. We've all faced moments where the world seemed to be crumbling beneath our feet. His words stir something in me, a half-formed question that's been nagging at the back of my mind. But before I can voice it, Tornu continues, his gaze drifting back to the fire. Did I ever tell you about the time your father, Ansel, Ekra, and I got caught up in a storm during a hunting trip? Your father and Ansel were about 16 or 17 cycles old then. Ekra and I in our early 20s. My eyebrows shoot up in surprise. It's strange to think of all them so young, especially Ekra. I lean in, curiosity piqued. No, you haven't. What happened? Tornu chuckles, but there's a hint of old tension in his voice. Your father, Fago, and Ansel had just completed their proving trials. They were riding high on their newfound status as adults in the tribe. I nod, understanding the weight of that moment. The proving trial has loomed large in my own thoughts lately. Fago suggested we go on a hunting trip, to bring back something impressive for the tribe, Tornu continues. Ansel agreed immediately. He was always eager to prove himself worthy of being the future chief. Ekra, he pauses, shaking his head. Ekra saw it as a chance to show she was just as capable. And you? I prompt, recognizing the familiar dance of ambition and insecurity. Tornu's expression turns rueful. I was terrified. Hunting wasn't my strong suit, and the thought of being out there, trying to keep up with the others. My stomach was in knots before we even left the village. I feel a rush of empathy. How many times have I felt that same dread, that fear of not measuring up? We'd been out for a day when the storm hit, Tornu says, his voice dropping. It came out of nowhere. The sky turned black, rain lashing down so hard we could barely see. I shiver, imagining the scene. What did you do? Ansel wanted to push on, prove we could handle it. Your father argued for finding shelter. Ekra—" Tornu's lips quirk in a humorless smile. "Ekra sided with Ansel back then, always trying to align herself with power. It was before their rift." "And you froze up, I guess, knowing all too well how that feels." Tornu nods. "Couldn't speak, couldn't move. The others were arguing, the storm was getting worse, and I just shut down." My heart aches for young Tornu, remembering my own moments of paralyzing fear. "So what happened?" "Your father noticed," Tornu says softly. "In the middle of all that chaos, he saw me struggling. He stopped arguing with Ansel and came over to me, put his hand on my shoulder and told me to breathe, exercising his own deep breaths along with me." I feel a lump form in my throat, picturing my father in that moment of kindness. "It was like he anchored me," Tornu continues. "Suddenly, I could think again, and I realized I knew these woods better than any of them. I'd spent countless hours exploring while they were training for their proving trials." "You knew where to find shelter," I breathed, seeing where this was going. Tornu nods, a glimmer of pride in his eyes. "There was a cave system nearby. I found my voice and told them about it. Ekra scoffed, of course, but your father backed me up. Even Ansel had to admit it was our best option." "Did Ekra give you trouble about it?" I ask, knowing how she can be. "Oh, she tried," Tornu says with a wry smile. "But something had changed. I'd found my footing, literally and figuratively. Her barbs didn't cut so deep anymore." I let out a long breath, turning this over in my mind. "So that's how you learned to deal with your anxiety? By focusing on what you do know, what you can contribute?" Tornu reaches out, squeezing my shoulder. "Partly. But more importantly, I learned that it's okay to be afraid. That even the bravest among us, like your father and Ansel, have moments of doubt. The key is not letting that fear paralyze you, and remembering that you're not alone in facing it." As the fire crackles between us, I feel a shift inside me. The anxiety doesn't disappear, but it feels different somehow, less overwhelming. I take a deep breath, letting it out slowly. "Thank you, Uncle," I say softly, "for sharing this, for everything." Tornu nods, his eyes warm with understanding. "We all have our battles, Yoren. The key is remembering that we don't have to fight them alone." The gentle smile that formed across his face while recounting that story quickly fades as he lets out a deep sigh, taking it a long moment before continuing. "Since we are on the topic, you've noticed the tension between Ekra and Ansel," he says, more statement than question. I nod, thinking back to the heated arguments I've witnessed over the years, the clash of ideals, the undercurrent of old wounds never quite healed. "It goes back further than you might think," Tornu continues, his voice low. "Back to when they were both young, full of fire and certainty." Tornu's voice drops low, as if sharing a secret. "It was the season of the great hunt. Ansel and Ekra, both in their prime, stood before the council." He paints a vivid picture, the flickering torchlight, the circle of elders, two young leaders to be with fire in their eyes. "Ansel spoke of expanding our hunting grounds," Tornu continues. "He'd heard tales from a wandering trader of vast herds beyond the mountains. Think of the bounty we could bring back, he argued. The knowledge we could gain." I can almost see it. Ansel, young and eager, gesturing towards distant horizons. But then Tornu's tone shifts. "Ekra, she saw only danger. Our ancestors thrived here for generations," she countered. "Why risk what we have for the unknown?" The debate raged through the night. Voices raised, tempers flared. By dawn, the council was split. In the end, Tornu sighs, they decided on a compromise. 2 hunting parties would go out. Ansel would lead one beyond our usual range. Ekra would lead another along traditional paths. I lean forward, caught up in the tale. "What happened?" Tornu's eyes grow distant. "Ansel's party returned, laden with game, eyes bright with discovery. But Ekra—" He trails off, and I feel a chill that has nothing to do with the night air. "2 of her hunters were lost to a flash flood. An old route, thought safe, turned deadly. The weight of those lives hangs heavy between us. I can imagine Ekra's grief, her guilt, and her rage. From that day on," Tornu concludes, "every success of Ansel's was to Ekra, bought with blood. Every suggestion of change became a personal affront." I sit back, understanding dawning. "And when Ansel was chosen as a leader," Tornu nods grimly, It was the final blow. In Ekra's eyes, the tribe had chosen a path of reckless endangerment. The fire pops, sending sparks skyward. In their brief light, I see the complexity of the situation. No villains, no heroes. Just people trying to do what they thought was right, in the long shadow of consequences. We sit in silence for a long moment, the weight of history settling around us like a cloak. The rivalry that shapes our tribe suddenly seems both more understandable and more insurmountable. Is there no way to bridge that divide? I ask finally. Tornia's smile is sad. That, my boy, is the question we've been wrestling with for a generation. And now, with this Dracolith attack, the old wounds are raw again. I nod slowly, seeing the layers of conflict that run through our tribe with new eyes. And now, I prompt, sensing there's more to the story. Tornu sighs, poking at the fire. Now Ekra sees every misfortune as proof that Ansel's path was wrong. The Dracolith attack, in her mind, it's the price we pay for not being vigilant enough, for looking outward instead of inward. But to leave, I begin, struggling to reconcile the idea with everything I've been taught, with how she can seemingly switch beliefs so easily. Ironic, isn't it? Tornu's lips quirk in a humorless smile. In her fear, she's willing to abandon the very traditions she claims to protect. Desperation can make us forget even the oldest teachings, it seems. And these days, it's as though she will do or believe just about anything, as long as it opposes Ansel. I'm quiet for a moment, mulling over his words. To my surprise, I find myself saying, maybe she's not entirely wrong. Tornu's eyebrows shoot up, and I hurry to explain. I mean, not about isolating ourselves, but about moving. The world is changing, Uncle. Maybe we need to change with it. Tornu studies me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he says, Have I ever told you the story of Weka and the Wielder? I shake my head, eager to hear a tale I've somehow missed. It happened not long after Taka's time. Tornu begins, his voice taking on the rhythmic cadence of a storyteller. There was a man, gifted by Weka with the power of light. Weka taught him words of power, combinations that could shape reality itself. I lean forward, captivated. Tornu continues. But Vortu, ever jealous, sought to control this man. He granted him powers of darkness, twisted versions of Weka's gifts. The man, caught between light and dark, grew powerful beyond measure. Tornu's voice drops to a whisper. But power corrupts, Yoren. The man lost himself to the conflicting forces within. In the end, he was consumed by his own power, destroying himself and leaving devastation in his wake. As the tale concludes, I sit back, my mind reeling. What does this mean for us, Uncle? For our tribe? Tornu meets my gaze, his eyes reflecting the dying fire. It means that change, even when necessary, must be approached with caution. We must learn from the past, but not be bound by it. Find balance, Yoren. That's the key. I nod slowly, understanding dawning. So we don't ignore the dangers Ekra fears, but we don't let those fears control us either? Tornu smiles, pride evident in his expression. Exactly. We adapt. We grow. But we do so wisely. That's how we honor Taka's teachings, while facing the challenges of our changing world. I stare into the fire, Tornu's words echoing in my mind. The weight of recent events presses down on me, and I find myself voicing the question that's been gnawing at my heart. Uncle, I begin hesitantly. How do you move past it? The grief, the pain from all the lives we've lost? My voice cracks slightly. It feels like it's going to swallow me whole sometimes. Tornu's eyes meet mine, filled with a deep, ancient sorrow. He's silent for a long moment, and when he speaks, his voice is low and heavy with emotion. You don't, Yoren. Not really. He sighs, running a hand through his graying hair. The pain, it doesn't go away. It might dull over time, become less sharp, less overwhelming. But it's always there, a part of you. I feel my heart sink, but Tornu continues, his gaze distant. The trick is learning to live with it. To carry it with you, not as a burden, but as a reminder of those we've loved and lost. He pauses, and I see a flicker of something in his eyes, a pain deeper than I've seen before. I never told you about my son, did I? I shake my head, stunned. Your son? Tornu nods slowly. His name was Garu. It was about your age when... He trails off, swallowing hard. When we lost him. I lean forward, captivated and heartbroken all at once. What happened? He was always curious, Always pushing boundaries, Tony says, a sad smile playing on his lips. Like you. He wanted to see beyond our borders. I tried to stop him, to make him understand the dangers, but he was headstrong, so sure of himself. Tony's voice catches, and I see tears glistening in his eyes. He snuck out one night, determined to prove himself. We found him 2 days later near the border. Something had gotten to him. Something we'd never seen before. The weight of his words hangs heavy in the air between us. I feel a lump forming in my throat, understanding now the source of Tornu's overprotectiveness, his constant warnings about the dangers beyond our borders. Uncle, I'm so sorry, I whisper, reaching out to place my hand on his arm. Tornu covers my hand with his own, squeezing gently. It nearly broke me, Yoren. The grief, the guilt. For a long time, I thought I'd never find my way out of that darkness. But you did, I say softly. He nods. I did. Not by forgetting or by trying to push the pain away, but by learning to live with it, to use it as a fuel to protect others, to share knowledge, to make sure Garu's death wasn't in vain. I sit with this for a moment, feeling the weight of Tornu's loss, of our tribe's recent losses. So we just keep going? I ask, my voice small. We keep going, Tornu affirms. We honor those we've lost by living, by protecting each other, by building a future they would be proud of. It's not easy, Yoren. Some days it feels impossible, but it's the only way forward. As the fire crackles between us, I feel a shift in my understanding. The grief doesn't disappear, but somehow it feels more manageable. A part of me, not a thing to be conquered or forgotten, but to be carried, to be learned from. Thank you, Uncle, I say, my voice thick with emotion, for sharing this, for everything. Tornu pulls me into a tight embrace, and I feel the strength in his arms, the love that's guided me all these years. As we sit there, under the star-filled sky, I make a silent promise to Garu, to Chiron, to all those we've lost. We'll keep going. We'll make you proud.